I think we're going to make a start.
Oh, okay.
And Harrison, you're the technical person for all the stages? Yeah. Okay, that's right. I don't know you yet.
All right, good morning everyone, and thank you so much for making the time to come to this presentation that Damien and Rick has put together. So what I'm going to do today is I'm just going to show you a few national trends, Queensland trends, and then focusing on the Sunshine Coast and then the 4575 postcode. Let's hope that I can work this, because even though I'm a researcher, technology is not my greatest vice. I'm a complete novice when it comes to technology. Where are my presentations, Harrison? That's the one. Okay. All right, so my email is up there if anybody would like to email me at any time. My business card is also on the table. What we're going to have a look today is the Sunshine Coast property market in 2014 and beyond. Some of the things that we'll have a look at, like I said, we'll start nationally with some of the core graphs that PRD produces. It covers a range of interesting things like unemployment, interest rate, home loan affordability, and my favorite, consumer confidence. Because yesterday I published a piece on the budget and what it means for the property market. And the first thing that I always say is when it comes to the market is the key thing is always confidence. The second that confidence is being shaken, unfavorable things happen in the market. So you will see that I put a lot of thought or a lot of emphasis when it comes to confidence in a lot of my core graphs, in a lot of my publication. We'll have a look at the recently published PRD's Australia Economic Report and what are some of the key indicators within that report. Now, we've prepared a little bit of a goodie bag for you to take away, to take home today, and each of you get a copy of the Australia Economic Report within that bag. So feel free to have a better look at it when you step into your office. We'll have a look at what's happening in the Sunny Coast region, so Sunshine Coast Regional, as well as postcode 4575 update. Something else that I want to have a quick look at as well is to map out where the current projects are in Sunshine Coast, and the way that PRD does that is that we separate it into residential, commercial, and infrastructure. And then Harrison, who has kindly enough come to this presentation, will just tell you a little bit about PRD research and what is it that we do. So let's start with your national and state, particularly Queensland core graph. Just on a side note to this, the way that we present our core graphs is we present national ones as well as state ones. So we have not just Queensland states core graphs, but we also have the core graphs for Victoria, New South Wales, all of the different states in Australia. So if at any point you are interested in any of the core graphs for other states other than Queensland, feel free to email me and I'll be able to shoot them through so that you know what's going on in other states. Like I said, confidence is the first thing that I always look at. And this one here is the Australia Consumer Sentiment Confidence. And the one thing that I'd like you to have a look at is, if you look at the trends around here, anything that is above that line is considered to be optimistic. So around October 2013, you start to see quite a bit of a spike and then a little bit of a downturn, which is usually normal for around your December, January time, because that's when people are pretty much spending quite a lot on Christmas and getting their credit card bills, all of those sort of things, which thankfully I don't, because I don't celebrate Christmas. And then that's why you see a little bit of a dip there to just below your optimistic line. The good news is that April 2014, which is quite recent, that has had a little bit of a pickup closer towards that optimistic line again. So within the space of 3 months, you've had a 0.3% or a 0.3 index increase from 99.5 to 99.7, which, like I said, brings us closer to that consumer sentiment positive optimism index. Good news on that sense. The one thing that I do want to say about the consumer sentiment is that sometimes whenever you see dips, particularly around here, there are always other factors other than just what the property market is doing. So anything that the government is doing, for example, the budget that's just been passed, interest rates, things like that, even the time of the year and how it affects people's spending will always be reflected into this consumer sentiment. So in reading it, you have to know what is behind it. But the one thing that we can take is the fact that we are moving into that optimism level again, and there's been an increase in the past 3 months as opposed to a decrease, which is good news. Interest rates, as we all know, have been held steady at 2.5%, which is good news for macroeconomic wise, because it means that it's a steadier financial market. And when there is a steadier financial market, that confidence also increases. The main thing when it comes to interest rate is that how it impacts your variable loans with banks. And so when there is a steady interest rate, then confidence increases because people feel that they'll be paying the same loans over and over again, like in terms of mortgage payments or any other bank loan payments. Employment status. This is always an interesting one, and the reason why it's always interesting is because, especially with the current movement of businesses cutting back on their level of employment or moving offshore, that will always impact what's going on in here. So the one thing that I am happy about is if you look at unemployment rate for Australia, and where the unemployment rate is for Queensland, you are seeing that drop in unemployment rate, which means that there is more people being employed and therefore more people having incomes. The good news for Queensland is if you were to do a comparison with all the other states, Queensland is the one that is going down and that it's held kind of steady around that area there. Some of the other states have actually experienced not a down just like that, but a bit of a down and then an up. So the good news about Queensland is that it's continuously just experiencing that downward trend. And again, this is impacted, or thanks to, I should say, by our tourism industry, our mining industry, those types of industries. Net migration. This is always an interesting one, particularly because it impacts your demographics. Now, unfortunately, the data, the way that the Department of Immigration releases their data is they only release it on a yearly basis after each financial year. So unlike other places who release this data on a quarterly basis, they only release it on a yearly basis. So the next one that will come out will be September 2014, which pretty much tells you the whole year. Now you can see a slight decrease, a decreasing trend there for Queensland, but it's starting to pick up a little bit and starting to steady. So I've been a bit of a stalker for the immigration department because I monitor the, you know, when you travel and you get those little travel cards to come in, I've been monitoring how many of those come in, and there is a live feed on the immigration website to report. So I've been a bit of a stalker. And my forecast is that it will start to go up. It's not going to go up like that, but it will be going up a little bit like this, just from monitoring the amount of people coming into Australia. Okay. A few reasons for that downfall or that decrease are our foreign exchange rate was quite strong last year, which makes things more expensive here in Australia. The age group that comes to Queensland has been largely around your 18 to your 30 bracket, which most of them come for uni, and university fees have also increased. So the combination between university fees increasing, the foreign exchange rate being strong, makes us a little bit of an expensive place to live in. The good news is that in comparison to other states, we're one of those where the trend is going up. Okay. Queensland is still behind New South Wales and Victoria when it comes to migration. Queensland figures are sitting at around 15% share of migration, where this is overseas migration, whereas New South Wales and Victoria are both at around 27 and 33%, something along those lines. But we are ahead of places like the ACT and the Northern Territory. They're taking out anywhere between 1 to 5% of overseas migration. I think we're comparable to WA. We're on 15% and WA is on 14.5. So we're sitting kind of like in that middle part on taking out migration. So let me go back to make sure I didn't skip one. So in terms of, like I said, immigration to Sunshine Coast, we've sort of pulled this out. You can see a bit of a downward trend for the Sunshine Coast. Again, remember that this is 2013 because of the data. You can see that for the LGA of Sunshine Coast, there is a bit of a downward there from 2,885 back in 2009 to 1,491 in 2012, 2013. So we've been able to break it down, and we can see that your family and your skilled are still the main people who come to the Sunshine Coast to settle. So hopefully what I want to do when, and I'll give everybody an update on this when the 2014 data comes up, because what I'm seeing, especially with the hospital and the university, is that, and again, me being a stalker in the migration cards, is that it should start to go up again for 2014. The good thing about those cards is that it actually tells you where they're going, like which state and also which part of the state. So that's why I can say those things. Dwelling approvals for Queensland have dropped a little bit since September 2013 to March 2014, which is normal when there's been that spike of dwelling approvals. Main reason for this is to make sure that there is no oversupply and that those dwellings that has been approved are actually selling and that they're doing well in the market. Compared to Australia-wide, you can see that there's a stabilization there in the amount of dwellings that's being approved. So it's pretty much in trend with what the rest of Australia is doing. Home loan affordability, my favorite. Home loan affordability has decreased slightly from September 2013 to the end of last year. Again, I would have loved to be able to show March 2014 data. However, the REIA puts it out pretty much around early June. So hopefully I'll be able to give Damien and Rick an update on this and it can be distributed to everybody. But what I'm predicting for Queensland is that it will go like that. The reason that it will go like that is because of the steady interest rates. Now, as you can see, there's been a decreasing in the home loan affordability. The good news for Queensland is the drop is not as steep as the rest of Australia. So when people see this graph, they're seeing that, okay, so in Queensland, yes, there's been a slight correction, but it's a very soft correction. It's not as steep as the rest of Australia, making our state seemingly affordable for other people. All right, so moving on to some of the economic report in key indicators that we have. I'll just run you through these. Like I said, we've given each of you a copy of it so that you can further read it when you get back to your office. I've already said that I'm a big fan of making sure or monitoring what's happening in regards to confidence. And by the end of last year, for business confidence, you can see that there's been quite an increase there for the whole of the nation. So this is an Australia-wide graph. And the good news is that there's improving confidence all around Australia. Macroeconomic climate. The way that we monitor the macroeconomic climate is that we look at the CPI as well as we look at what the interest rates are doing. Now, CPI-wise, there has been an increase. Everyone knows that there's been an increase in prices. There's been a bit of inflation, and it's mirrored pretty much in this particular graph. So macroeconomic climate, when that you can see that's your RBA target range there between 2 to 3%, it's hitting right in the middle, which means that in layman terms, economic-wise, we're good. Okay? So that's why I always say if you're between that, we can still say that the economy is going the way that we want it. The next graph that we always look at is the foreign exchange and the commodity price index. In terms of commodity prices, that's mirrored pretty much in your CPI, and you can see that there's been an upward trend in prices, which everyone knows about. Prices have been increasing steadily, again mirroring the CPI levels. Foreign exchange rate. This is the part that I like, because foreign exchange rate, there's been a decrease in foreign exchange rates, which means that our dollar have experienced a softening and have experienced a bit of a correction. That's the part where it's so expensive for people to come buy our goods and invest in our goods and services. This is the part where it makes it more affordable for everybody else to afford our goods and services. So when we're seeing that sort of a trend, if we're wanting to, the foreigners to invest and buy all of our goods, that's the time for them to buy it. In terms of at the moment, the way that it's going is, see how it's going down like that? It's starting to steady. The Australian exchange rate is starting to steady. So it's not going up and down like this, but it's starting to steady on like that, which is a good thing. Makes the foreign investors a bit happier that they're still going to pay the same amount of money every single time. Unemployment rate, it has increased over the past few months, and the reason why unemployment rate, as all of you have known, a lot of the big businesses have shut down shop. They've put their manufacturing or their outsourcing to somewhere else, and everyone knows about some of the job cuts that a lot of the big businesses have had, both in the public sector as well as the private sector. And again, this is mirrored in this labor market and the unemployment rate. Construction market. Again, I'm a fan of this because it tells me how we're doing in terms of the demand and supply in the market, because the construction market pretty much follow the demand of the market and seeing whether or not there's been an oversupply. By the end of last year, we've seen a bit of a decrease in the activities when it comes to construction market. However, for this year, because there has been an increase in demand, I am predicting, so it's not going to go up like that as such, but it's going to start trending in that way, which is always good news. So the reason for that there's been a drop there is last year, and remember this is the whole of Australia, there's been an oversupply in places like Sydney and Melbourne, and therefore there's been a bit of a drop in Australia-wise. It's normal when there's been that level of increase. It's very normal to have a bit of a drop there. But hopefully that will start to go up like that, if I'm correct in monitoring the amount of projects that's been approved. House finance. Good news, banks are approving more and more loans. That's pretty much what this graph tells you. It tells you how much the banks are willing, or how committed they are in funding a lot of projects, mortgages, residential properties, etc. And you can see that there's been an increase in the housing finance commitment. And you can also see that for investment, there's been a spike. So that means more and more people are buying properties to invest, and banks are very receptive of this, and that's why you've seen that sharp increase in the bank's commitments. Owner-occupier, there's been an increase as well, but it's not as big as investment. Time to buy dwelling index. I like monitoring this because I want to make sure, I want to know what the market is thinking about whether or not it's a good time to buy a dwelling. We've separated the graphs into all of the different states. However, you can sort of see, and it's a bit complicated here, which is why I encourage you to have a look at the publication. But you can see that for Queensland, which is green, in terms of time to buy a dwelling, people have mixed feelings whether or not that is a good time to buy a dwelling. In some places like Victoria, there's been an increase in people's feelings that, yep, it's a good time to buy a dwelling. In Western Australia, same with Queensland, people have mixed feelings. South Australia, not so good. And New South Wales, remember this is for owner occupiers. So the reason why there is these decreases is that owner occupiers sometimes feel not threatened, I should say, but a bit bought out of the market because of investors. Okay, so that's why you see some of these drops. Ooh. Dwelling prices. We always monitor this to make sure that we know where each of these 8 capital cities stand when it comes to whether or not there's been an increase in the dwelling prices. For all, you can see that there is an increase. Where are we? For Brisbane, for example, there's an increase of about 3.4% when it comes to dwelling prices. So it's always good news when you're on that side. We won't talk about Canberra because I don't want to offend anybody who comes from Canberra. But it's always good news when you're on that side. And you can see that for all of the capital cities in Australia, there has been increases, well, except for Canberra, that there's been increases in the dwelling prices. Again, that's a good sign that the market is picking up. Home affordability. We've talked about home affordability. This is a more detailed graph to show you home affordability by state. Okay, and as you can see with Queensland, which is your green, it went down 2 years ago, but now with December 2013, it has stabilized, making people more receptive to owning homes or buying homes in Queensland because it's now more affordable. Like the affordability has steadied on. So I encourage you to have a look at that graph in more detail in the publication. Vacancy rates. Everyone wants to know about vacancy rates. What's happening in the vacancy rates? Now, as of January 2014, again, I would love to show you the May figures, but the May figures don't come out until June. So I'll pass it on to Rick and Damien. But as you can see that in terms of annual change, there's been an increase and that your vacancy rates have increased as well. Okay, so that's always good news. Where is Brisbane? Brisbane have starting to experience an increase in their vacancy rates, which is good. Okay, rent prices. You always want to make sure, the way that you read this is obviously looking at there's your neutral line and you want to look at the ones that are above. So for places like Brisbane, when it comes to 3-bedroom houses, there's been an increase of 1.4%. However, for your 2-bedroom units, there's been a decrease of 2.8%. So that's the way that you read this graph. And as you can see across the 8 capital cities, most of them have increased. Okay, so for example, for Sydney, both houses and units have increased. For Melbourne, no change in the houses, but a decrease in units. Whereas in Adelaide, Perth, that Adelaide? Yep, Adelaide, Perth, Hobart, bedroom houses have increased in price. Units, however, have not had much of a change when it comes to prices. So that's the way that you read this graph there. Demographics. Always love demographics, only because it tells you how many people are going to be in that particular spot, and also what kind of people are going to be in that particular spot. Population-wise, so the annual change in population is that there is a very, very slight increase in population, only about 0.1, 0.2% change. Okay, and again, this is the red line is pretty much your national, whereas the blues are your states. So if we look at Queensland, we can see that there's been an increase in the Queensland population. This is both from population growth, natural population growth, as in babies being born, as well as interstate migration plus overseas migration as well. So you can see that there's been an increase in the Queensland population as a whole. Don't want to know why no one wants to go to New South Wales though. Because it seems like it's the only one that has like a big minus in it. Okay, so moving away from graphs, I didn't want to, actually I shouldn't promise that there won't be any more graphs. Being a researcher, there's probably more graphs than I can remember. But let's have a look at what the Sunshine Coast is doing. The first thing that we want to have a look at is the sales and growth chart for Sunshine Coast Regional for all types of dwellings. So the way that this particular section and the 4575 section, what I've done is that I've looked at it from a holistic view, so that means all types, and then I've also separated it to houses, units, and then commercial, industrial. So as a whole, you can see for the Sunshine Coast region, and by the way, I pulled out this data, when was it, Harrison? 2 days ago? 2 days ago. So this captures sales up to 2 days ago. And you can see that there's been a strong increase there for Sunshine Coast with a growth of 6.4%. Okay, that's phenomenal. Brisbane's is not that much. I ran the data for Brisbane City and it was at 3.6 growth. So the Sunny Coasts regional for all types, and this is probably the one that you really want because it captures every single sale in Sunshine Coast. There's been a 6.4% growth. That's just a bit more of a breakdown of the data. I went back 10 years and as you can see there, even around the time where the GFC hit for Sunny Coast, yes, there was a bit of a reduction in growth, however, it bounced back straight away. So what that tells you is that the Sunshine Coast economy is very resilient, even in GFC mode. So you can sort of monitor there that there's been growth, it's on green, and even though there's been a reduction over the past, from 2011 to 2012, the market has bounced back in 2013 to 4.9, and it's currently at 6.4. Okay, so that just tells you your number of sales, and then the median price have increased from $409,000 to $435,000 as of 2 days ago. The combined residential market, which is just houses and units being combined together, you can see that there is a strong increase of growth there, even stronger than all combined at 7.0%. Again, this is great. Brisbane's is not this high. Right? And just remember that I pulled out the data only 2 days ago. And I'll show you a little bit more data for the 4575, which I just find to be phenomenal. Just for the housing market, it is growing. It's a green, and I like using these arrows with the colors because it immediately tells me what's going on. Not as big as the Sunshine Coast in general, but it is still growing at that 2.0%. Vacant land have also gone up in terms of sales growth at 3.1%. Commercial and industrial sales have also increased by 9%, which is phenomenal for Sunshine Coast. Again, I didn't want to overload everyone with data, but if anybody wants this coming out of, because all of these graphs have that type of a data behind it. So if anybody wants to see this data behind any of these graphs, feel free to email me and I can shoot you through the data behind these graphs. Okay. With these graphs, there's two data sets that I can send you. One is that data set, which just gives you a nice, kind of like overlook for the past 10 years of what's going on. But there's also obviously to be able to plot this, I needed the Excel big master sheet on all of the sales that has happened over the past 10 years. So if anybody wants that master Excel sheet as well, more than happy to give it to you so that you know who are the players, when were the properties sold and what agency, things like that. So we've talked about vacant land, commercial. Now let's have a look at postcode 4575 update. For all types of property, again, that's your commercial, house, unit, etc., there's been a phenomenal growth of 11.9%. And like I said, I pulled out the exact same data set from the 1st of January 2004 up to 2 days ago, which was, I don't even remember the date of the day, 14th of May 2014. So this is the most latest data that you can get. So you can see that there is that increase of 11.9%, which is phenomenal. Again, I can give you this detailed data if you need to. You can, it's similar to the Sunny Coast. There has been a correction both in 2011, 2012. However, for postcode 4575, again, it has also recovered from that negative growth. And this just shows that level of stability and that level of sophistication in the supply and demand for property in Sunny Coast. Combined residential market, there's been an increase. Okay. From memory, I know that was on the 5-point-something%. So if you need that data, just let me know. House sales. This is the part that I wanted to talk about. 9.4% growth. And when I checked the data set on Tuesday, the 24th of April, there were 24 house sales. I checked it again on Wednesday, the 14th of May, and there were 66 house sales. So within the space of less than a month, you've gone from 24 house sales to 66 house sales, just for postcode 4575, which is pretty good. The same with units. Units, when I checked the sales on the 24th of April, was 12 sales. And then when I checked it on Wednesday, the 14th of May, 42 sales for units. So overall, for 2014, you've got a growth of 2.2%. But in terms of the sales just within that month, or that within that very small time frame, that's a 300% increase in unit sales. Vacant land sales, on 24th of April, went to 6 on Wednesday, the 14th of May. So that's pretty good for vacant land. And over the years, there's from between 2013 to 2014, even though that graph I don't think that came out quite right, but there's been that very sharp increase of 135.4% in the market. Commercial and industrial sales have gone down a little bit by 31.2%. However, I have to point out that that's only because there's been 2 sales in the market in 2014, whereas previously in 2013 there's been 6. So, always just be careful that's why I've put this on there because it does show that by the end of last year, there has been a high increase of 47.5%. It's just been 2 sales this year that has dropped it lower. So that's why I always encourage people to look at the trend over the past 10 years.